What if I started every video with a joke? Like, why were the pirates okay with the rising sea levels? Because they wanted to sail the high seas. The seas were getting higher. I'll imagine all of you are laughing hysterically out there. So, how can we tell the domain and the range from graphs? We did interval notation. We talked about what domain and range are. Domain is the set of all input values that make sense. Range is the set of all output values that make sense. So in that case, in a graph, the horizontal axis is usually the inputs. The vertical axis is usually the outputs. So then the domain is just going to be all the horizontal values, and the range is going to be all the vertical values. Let's do that with an example. Express the domain and the range of this function in interval notation. All right, we got a picture here that shows Alaska crude oil production between 1975 and 2008, maybe? This is 2005 and then 6, 7, 8, I guess. Well, I guess I kind of answered the domain already. Domain is the set of input values that make sense for this function. And it looks like it starts at 1975. Maybe it started before then. Who knows? And again, we have a choice. What is our input value? That's very important, because if you don't talk about what your input is, there's two answers for the domain. Is our input the year? We start at 1975, or is our input years since 1975, and then we'd start at 0? That's your choice. Let's show some variety here. Let's have input be the year. We'll call that Y, or you could use T. And the output is going to be thousands of barrels per day, oil production. Oil production, thousands of barrels per day. So we can use whatever we want. We could use O. We could use P. I don't know. But if you don't say what your input variables and your output variables are, the domain and range doesn't really make sense. This part's pretty important. You know what? I'll write that down. Important. How about that? So the domain is going to be all the years that make sense. Well, we started in 1975. We're going to use interval notation. We went up to 2008. Those years were included, so we'll put them in brackets. Now, the range is where you got to be a little careful, because it's very tempting, and don't write this down, very tempting to say, well, we started around 200 thousands of barrels a day, and we ended at about 700. But this is wrong. Because what's the biggest? The range should say the smallest and the biggest output. That makes sense. Well, the smallest is actually not where we started. The smallest is a little later, right? The smallest value of this function, the smallest output value, is actually right here. So even though the inputs, we can go furthest to the left, furthest to the right, the outputs are really smallest down and biggest up. When you look at the outputs, we're actually, ooh, my program almost froze. The biggest, wherever at, is here. So that's the smallest. Up here is the biggest. Now we just kind of estimate. What's the Y value here? I don't know, maybe it's like 180 or something. And what's the biggest value here? It's a little over 2,000. You can approximate it however you want. 2020. I was going to make a joke and say that was a good year, but that was not a good year. That was a bad year for a lot of people. All right, so that's our domain and range. Let me know if you have any questions. And try it now yourselves. This next one, with the world population increase. Tell me what your inputs and outputs are, and then give me the domain and the range. All right, pause the video, give it a shot, enjoy. All right, so our input, we can do the same thing. You could do years since 19, what is this? The first one over here at 1952, is that the X coordinate? I think so. So you could just have input be the year Y. And that really does make more sense since it's actually on the X-axis. I should have said that earlier with the last example. Normally we have two choices, but they're kind of telling us exactly what Y should be, or what X should be, rather. Whatever our input should be, we're using the letter Y as our input, which is fine. But a lot of times we think of X as the horizontal and Y as the vertical. But one of the things I'm going for in this class is to get us comfortable with using other letters for things. So our input can be Y, and that's fine. So input's going to be your Y. Output is going to be the population increase, not the population increase in millions. Increase. And it is important that you specify in millions, and we can use just the letter P again if we want. Because if we don't include the millions, then this value right here would be like 75 million. But if we write in millions, then we can just write 75. Saves us from writing some zeros. So our domain here, what's the smallest input? What's the biggest input? And do we have everything in between? The smallest input's going to be that year 1952, I think. The biggest input is all the way to the right. That's whatever year this is. I can't tell. Is that 2003? Make a guess. I'll give it to you if you're close. And we do have everything in between, so we'll connect it like this. Those edge years, 2003. It might be 2002, actually. The edge years are included, so we have the square brackets. And so on. For the range, we find what's the smallest, what's the lowest point. The lowest point is right here. What's the highest point? Highest point's right here. The lowest is going to be about 40 million. And the highest is going to be, I don't know, about 88 million. Again, we're approximating. We don't have the data written, so we're approximating visually. Let me know if you have any questions, and that's domain and range from graphs.